Mr. Press, there's a telephone call for you on line 3. It's Cary Grant. My name is Richard E. Press, and I'm currently an archival consultant to J Press, which was founded by my grandfather, Jacoby Press, and I ended up as president and CEO of J Press before the company was sold to the Japanese licensee, our very successful Onward Kashiyama, which had over 100 J Press departments in Japan. Currently, I write. I'm a columnist on the bi-weekly website on J Press Online, and I'm the author of 2 books published by J Press privately that are available in the stores and online. Threading the Needle.
Wow, what a great introduction. That you've got a long list of things that you do, Richard. Let's go back to the beginning. Tell me about your grandfather.
My grandfather, who I worshipped, he died when I was 13 years old. He came to the United States in 1896 from the shtetl town of Baltramansk in what is now Latvia. He was studying to become a rabbi, which was the generational responsibility of the Press family. His older brother, who was called the Moshe Gedalia, the man of God, and he put my grandfather through an intolerable series of Talmud studies, and at the same time there were pogroms against the Jews in the area. And my grandfather, together with a bunch of brothers and sisters, decided to take off, and they emigrated to the United States, where they were met at the Boston Pier by my grandfather's brother, who ran a Schneiderei, which is a tailor shop in Waterbury, Connecticut. My grandfather was 16 years old. And he interned and learned the trade at his brother's tailor shop in Middletown, Connecticut, whereupon the Episcopal Bishop of Connecticut, Bishop Atchison, whose son Dean later became Secretary of State under Harry Truman, Archbishop Atchison, who was also a graduate of Yale University, told my grandfather, hey, there's an old custom tailor in New Haven, Mr. Goldbaum, who was looking to retire. You would be great there. So he arranged what we call in Jewish the shidduch between Mr. Goldbaum, who had a custom tailor shop on Elm Street in New Haven since the Civil War, and my grandfather had learned how to tailor and cut at the shop in Middlebury, and he became an intern at Goldbaum and Press, and he went to all around Yale University knocking on doors and selling them from swatches. Well, Goldbaum saw that he had a talented guy to take over the business. He sold out the business to Jacoby Press, who founded J Press Incorporated in 1902. Ah!
Wow.
Wow.
That's an amazing story, and you know, what do you think the landscape of tailoring and men's clothing was when Jacoby founded J Press?
Well, Yale University at the time was a very elitist institution, and the student body was made up of mostly prep school graduates who came from the real old money families, and they dressed very formally in 3-piece suits, and when they went informal on weekends to their clubs in the Hamptons or Martha's Vineyard or wherever, or Newport, they wore a custom blue blazer and white slacks. Now at the time, most of the shops were custom tailored, and my grandfather was a custom tailor. So he entertained a lot of salespeople from the British Isles, and most of the American tailor shops were buying from American resources, and my grandfather was one of the first principals to buy most of his materials, woolens and tweeds from England and Scotland and Ireland. And he set a very original paradigm for custom tailor, which was eaten up alive by the elite of Yale students at the time.
Incredible, incredible. And, you know,
Wait, I have to interrupt you because this is really important. They really copied the tailoring of the British Savile Row style, which Brooks Brothers, who were a prime competitor of J. Press for many years, had Americanized the Savile Row style with a natural shoulder jacket and button-down shirts. And my grandfather adopted the Brooks Brothers look in his own way, with a flat pocket on all the button-down shirts and a hook vent. So it differentiated J. Press from Brooks Brothers. I had to get that addendum in.
oh no, I appreciate that addendum for sure. And tell me about, you know, you said you were 13 when he passed away, but what do you remember about Jacoby Press the man?
The man, my love and absolute mutually adoring situation took place when I was maybe 3 or 4 years old, where he would pick me up in New Haven and take me to Edgewood Park, which was sort of nearby, where we would feed the pigeons. And then he would take me to the post office, which was open at the time, the New Haven Post Office on Church Street in New Haven. And from there we'd pick up the receipts from the Saturday sales from all the other stores. And he would take me to J. Press, where he would open up the safe and even taught me the code. And I opened up the safe myself at age 5, I think. I didn't take any of the money. But I had a very close relationship with him. He was a hero to me throughout my life, as he was a hero to his son Irving, who followed him as head of the business, and my father, who was born in 1913, and he became president eventually in about 1951 when my grandfather died.
And were you destined to always be in this business, or was there a time where you wanted to do something
No,
different?
I always wanted to be in the business. And when I was a kid, I used to go to Hebrew school to study for my bar mitzvah. My grandfather was alive at the time, and I would go from Hebrew school to the J. Press store at 262 York Street, where I would rummage through all the tweeds. And I gotta tell you, by the time of my bar mitzvah, at the time my grandfather passed away, I knew all the stock at J. Press. And my grandfather didn't have size, and I guess they decided not to make custom clothing for me for my bar mitzvah. But my grandfather one day took me, I was age 12, to the New York store, which was on the corner of Madison and 44th Street. And from there, he took me across the street to Brooks Brothers. And all the salesmen of Brooks Brothers, they all knew Jacoby Press, and they bowed down to him because he was a hero to all his competitors. And he took me to the 6th floor, where he got me a Brooks Brothers a blazer and the gray flannel slacks. And he paid cash, and he said, let's go back to the store. And we went back to J. Press. He tore off the Brooks Brothers label. He altered the clothes himself and put the J. Press label on. So that's when I was 13 years old, and it went on and on from there, with only the memory, the heroic memory of my grandfather that stayed with me until even now, these days, when I'm back and my mid-octogenarian years as a consultant and a writer at J. Press.
That's incredible. What a story. What a beautiful memory that is.
Grande histoire.
So as you entered the business, you know, it'd obviously been a few years since Jacoby founded the business. Was the style kind of the same, you know, 20 or 30 years later, or was it already, well, much later than that, but was it shifting at that point?
It shifted immeasurably. That's the right word, but it shifted historically immediately following World War II. My grandfather was gone, and both my Uncle Irving Press and his brother, my father Paul Press, knew that if they wanted to compete with Brooks Brothers and look into the last half of the 20th century moving forward, they changed from becoming more or less a custom tailor shop into ready-made, and they adopting the custom tailor 3-button natural shoulder pseudo-English styles that were favored in the custom department into ready-made and ready-to-wear. And by 1950, there were thousands of J-Press ready-to-wear sport jackets, suits, blazers, trousers, all hanging in the racks of the J-Press stores, and sold throughout the United States by sales personnel who traveled to hotel rooms to sell J-Press clothes to the alumni throughout America who went to Yale, Princeton, and Harvard, and Dartmouth, my rah-rah school, to continue their wardrobe for J-Press, even in places where there was no J-Press store.
And when did the term Ivy style come along and that movement start? And can you talk a little bit about that and J-Press's place within that?
Well, the term Ivy style became nationally recognized in 1954 when Life magazine ran, and Life magazine at the time was the largest selling publication in America, had a circulation over 10 million. Publisher was Henry Luce, Yale graduate class of 1912, who was a friend of my grandfather, and when he was at Yale was a J-Press customer. And the article was headlined J-Press Ivy style heads across the United States. Its birther was J-Press, and it had a picture of my uncle, my father, and the story was really about a J-Press.
And can you describe Ivy style?
Ivy style is a very tastefully chosen, usually English fabrics in tweeds and worsted fabrics for clothing, and the style had a natural shoulder. Most of the popular brands in the United States at that time had big football padded shoulders, so it differentiated J-Press and the Ivy style from the Main Street America with natural shoulders and a 3-button closure on the sport jackets. The trousers were plain front and no pleats. Now, I must tell you that Yale and all of the Ivy League schools, the prime heroes at the time were the great athletes, the football players. Yale Bowl would have football games with crowds of 70,000, and J-Press outfitted many of these athletes, so they had to fit large athletic bodies. So the style of J-Press didn't need any padding in the shoulders, because many of the customers were athletes. They didn't need to fake the shoulders, and they had to have room in the chest and the waist. So that really fitted, no pun intended, the J-Press look.
So when that article came out, did y'all see just a tremendous uptick in business?
Yes.
Or what did that article do for the business?
It brought in non-Ivy League people who were not necessarily followers or alumni of the Ivy League colleges. It brought them to J-Press and equivalent Ivy League stores such as Brooks Brothers. It became, as the French would say, de rigueur. It was the way of life for many of the leaders in American life, which was finalized to most acclaim during the JFK Camelot years. Many of the J-Press customers were members of the Kennedy administration, and JFK and Bobby Kennedy and McNamara, Secretary of Treasury, bought their clothes at Chip, which was a competitor next door to J-Press in New York, and was founded by Sid Winston and Lou Prager, who were managers of the J-Press Princeton store and the New York store. So everything really segued out of J-Press. But it was during the Camelot years of the Kennedy administration that most of the leadership and the so-called governing sector of American style, both in finance and government administration, wore so-called Ivy League style, many of whom were J-Press customers, and many of whom I got to know personally.
So, what was your role at the company during that time?
Well, I started out as a traveling salesperson, which means that we'd take a trunk and we'd have one item from the entire stock at J Press, and we would travel to the LaSalle Hotel in Chicago, the Biltmore Hotel in Los Angeles, hotels all around across the country, and that's how I started. And the hotel room looked like a retail store. And a mailing list with brochures would go out nationally, thousands of them. And J Press did a roaring business, and I became inured as a salesperson at J Press through these road shows. Then I always wanted to live in New York. I grew up in New Haven, which I thought was a little too provincial for me. I didn't want to identify myself with Yale. That's one of the reasons I went to dear old Dartmouth, bless her name. And I moved to New York, where I wanted to be part, and I was, of the drinking high life of New York, participating in the roaring nightlife and the joie de vivre that New York City was, and to some extent, a good deal less, but still is today.
Well, speaking of the nightlife, I was reading in your book. I would be remiss if I didn't ask about Sinatra. How'd you meet him, and maybe describe a little bit about that fateful night out that you described in the first book?
Well, my role, which my uncle Irving Press enunciated to me, was you stand at the door, Richard, and greet everyone as they come in. And you say to them, "Hi, I'm Richard," or Dick Press, which was my Dartmouth nickname. "Hi, I'm Dick Press. How can we help you?" Well, I was at the door one day in January 1959, in January 1969, and who walks in the door but Frank Sinatra with a retinue of followers. And I greeted him. I said, "Hello, Mr. Sinatra. My name is Dick Press. How may we help you?" And he looked me up and down with a look that would have melted most people, but I think I was reasonably tough at the time. He looked at me, he said, "Dick Press, all right, Dick, show me your 38 regulars." So I took Mr. Sinatra to the back of the store, and he picked out a 38 regular J Press suit, tried it on. He said, "I like it. Let me see your 38 regulars." I showed him there. Maybe there were 20, 38 regulars. He says, "I'll take them all. Let's go to the fitting room." So we went to the fitting room. And I said, "Well, Mr. Sinatra, this is Felix Samuelson." Felix Samuelson was our prime fitter at J Press. He was an Auschwitz survivor. And how did he survive Auschwitz? He outfitted the SS. And believe me, you don't make any mistakes outfitting the SS. So he was pluperfect. And he told Sinatra his story, which Sinatra appreciated. And Sinatra said, "Okay, let me have the chalk. Richie, let's go. Where's the nearest bar?" And he took me to the Biltmore. I took him to the Hotel Biltmore, which was the headquarters of the Ivy League, quote, under the clock at the Biltmore in those days. And the bar was empty. It was 2 in the afternoon. He tells the bartender, he says, "Take out the Jack Daniels." Now, Jilly Ritsu was his bodyguard, and a saloon operator was with us. And a police officer, I forget the guy's name now, and a couple of his hangers-on. And he had told me, he said, "Richie, when we get back, I want you to outfit the whole crew also." Well, maybe 5 or 6 Jack Daniels later, I was barely standing. He said to me, "Are you married, single, Richie?" I said, "I'm married." He said, "What's your wife's name?" I said, "Vida, V-I-D-A, Vida." He said, "All right, I want you and Vida to join me next Saturday night for dinner, and we'll go see my son who's singing at the Rainbow Room." I came home that day. I said, "Vida, guess where we're going? Next Saturday night, this weekend, we're going to go with Frank Sinatra." My wife almost dropped dead. She's still alive, by the way, and still blooming. At any rate, make a long story short, we had dinner at, oh God, I can't remember the fabulous Italian restaurant where we had the whole Sinatra crew, and we went from there to the Rainbow Room, where Frank Jr. gave, by the way, a wonderful, wonderful performance. And before while Sinatra was at the bar in the building, he said, "Richie, you got to buy a table for the gang at J Press for." So I was reading the room for. Oh God. At any rate, we got through with many more Jack Daniels. How I was still alive, I don't know. And he said, "All right, let the chauffeur take the girls home. We're going to go to Toots Shores." Well, Toots Shores was the bar hangout on East 52nd Street, which was the athletic celebrity hangout. Women were generally not allowed there. And we went, the chauffeurs took us to Toots Shore, where Toots Shore, who was a rotund character, an ex-bootlegger, and a rough guy, grabbed somebody, "Hey, Frank!" And Frank said, "Want you to meet Richie Press?" So at any rate, at 4 in the morning, when they turned the lights out, my lights had already gone out, and Sinatra said to his chauffeur, he says, "Take Richie home and get him out of the cab."
Well, that's unbelievable.
Yes.
So what was his drink? Jack Daniels?
Jack Daniels.
Neat on the rocks?
Neat.
Wow, incredible. Was he wearing his J Press suit?
He was wearing his J Press suit.
Well, that's the one story that I know about because I read it in the book, but is there, I'm sure you have many, but can you recall one or two that comes to mind of some of your favorite fittings or memories in the J Press store?
One day on the floor of the 44th Street store, an announcement came over the office loudspeaker to me on the floor. "Mr. Press, there's a telephone call for you on line 3. It's Cary Grant." Cary Grant. I figured it's one of my friends bullshitting me. Pardon my use of language. At any rate, I get on the phone, and somehow or other I manage to shut up for a minute, and I hear, "Mr. Press." I can't imitate him that well. "Mr. Press, this is Cary Grant." I said, "Oh, Mr. Grant, what can I do for you?" He said, "A lot of my friends are great fans of your J Press Shaggy Dog sweaters, and I'd love to pick out a few. I wondered if I might be able to come down to the store one time, even today, if it'd be possible, if you'd be around. What's a good time? I don't like crowds. I'm a little self-conscious about it. It's a good time to show." I said, "Come on down. It's a Tuesday. Come on down about 3 in the afternoon. The store won't be crowded." He said, "Okay." So Cary Grant came down to J Press, and I greeted him at the door. And he said, "Now let me see your size 40 Shaggy Dogs." And I showed him that was on a ramp in the store. He said, "I'll take he tried it on. He said, fit blue perfect. I'll take every one of them." And he said, "As long as I'm here, some of my friends also wear J Press clothing. And how about if I do a custom blazer? And then I can pick out the cloth. I have certain clothes." So I took him to our custom department where we had rolls, loads of swatches, and he picked out a cashmere and wool blazer cloth, and Felix Samuelson, our fitter that I mentioned earlier, fitted him. And he said, "I wondered, Mr. Press, if you and Felix could do me a big favor." He said, "Believe it or not, even though I'm a so-called celebrity, an actor, movie star, I'm still very self-conscious about being in public places, doing having private things taken care of. Could you come up to my hotel, perhaps, for the fitting of the blazer?" I said, "Of course we can. We'd be honored." So about 3-4 weeks later, Felix and I went up to his hotel. I can't remember the name of it. It's on the corner of 6th Avenue of the Americas and 54th Street. And we fitted him, and we made many more visits. And the association, along with Frank Sinatra and my memory of other celebrities, stay with me forever in my mind and in my heart. Cary Grant's right up there at the top rung.
That's perfect. Thank you for sharing that.
With Sinatra?
No, just in general. Just in general.
Well, when I first came in the business, Walter Matthau, the actor, was a longtime J Press customer. When I was a kid growing up in New Haven, I was a great theater goer at the Schubert Theater in New Haven, which had all the Broadway tryouts. And I don't know, maybe I was 13, 14 years old. I saw a play called The Gray-Eyed People, which had starred the yet still unknown Walter Matthau. And I loved the play. And unfortunately, it went to Broadway and closed in 3 days. So when Matthau came in, I went over and introduced myself to him. I said, Mr. Matthau, I'm Richard Press, and I want you to know that I saw you when I was maybe 14 years old at the Schubert, New Haven, to see you in The Gray-Eyed People, which I loved. And Matthau said to me, you know what, Press? He said, you and my grandmother are the only ones who remember that play. Another story, which actually Walter Matthau and our fitter Felix Samuelson. Matthau was getting fitted when just at the time he was about to open on Broadway on Neil Simon's play that was a great hit, The Odd Couple, and he was getting fitted actually for the outfit that he wore in The Odd Couple, and he said to Felix, Felix, do me a favor, I want you and your wife to join me for the opening night party for The Odd Couple, which Felix did, and I was invited, and I went also. And we went to the after party, which was at Sardi's, the theatrical hangout off Broadway. And Matthau said, hey, Felix, come here, come with me, you too, Richie. And he said, I want to introduce you to my co-star. Oh my God, his name's escaped. Do you remember? He played Felix, which was the character in The Odd Couple. And he said, now I want you to meet the real Felix. Couple others. Montgomery Clift, the movie star, was an occasional customer. And he came in the store one day absolutely out of his mind, drunk, and threw up on the 40 regulars.
Oh, jeez. And you mentioned, I want to talk about New Haven for a bit.
Yes.
Because I went to the store, I love the store. I know it wasn't the original store, but the new store that y'all have is very beautiful, and I know you have a lot of memories in the old store, but can you talk about the role that New Haven has played into the evolution of J Press?
Oh, absolutely. Well, as I mentioned earlier in the interview, my grandfather got his start knocking on the doors of the Yale dormitories, cornering Yale students as customers in J Press. And by the time of the First World War, where many Yale students, of course, enlisted or were drafted, probably 70% of the business in New Haven was with Yale students, administration, athletes, coaches, everyone connected with Yale. So Yale insinuated itself very closely into the business of J Press and continued to do so. Now, at the same time, in 1932, my grandfather opened a store on Dunster, Mount Auburn Street, on the first floor of the DU Delta Upsilon Club at Harvard. And J Press became insinuated virulently with the student body at Harvard, as it had in New Haven with Yale. And in 1936, J Press opened a store in Princeton and became very, very popular amongst the student body at Princeton. And at the same time, the sales travelers who were salesmen traveled to Amherst and my alma mater, Dartmouth. And they used to hang a flag on the building, which was upstairs from the Dartmouth bookstore, a big flag that said J Press in town. And while I was at Dartmouth, a fraternity stole the flag. I called my father, what should I do? My father said, leave the flag in the fraternity. It's the best advertisement we got. So even Dartmouth participated as J Press customers, which made me very proud because I had 4 glorious years, Animal House years, in my time at Dartmouth.
Incredible. And when I was talking to Jim at the New Haven store, he mentioned to me that there was just, at that time, there was like 10 or 12 stores just right on that block around the original J Press store. J Press is the only one still standing. And, you know, obviously you're a little biased here, but I'd be curious to hear, like, what you think is the reason that J Press has lasted all those years amongst that big competition?
Because most of the other stores were family owned and were passed on generationally. And when the current generational owners of my competitors, I'm talking now in the 19 back to the 1980s, 90s. By 2000, they had died out, and they were never replaced. They just went out of business, and they weren't carried on by the owners' families. Saks Fifth Avenue had a men's store, but it didn't work, and they gave it up. So J Press was the sole survivor, really, because of the lack of generational continuity.
And to that, speaking of generational continuity, how important is it for you to carry on the tradition of J Press into future generations?
Well, when I sold the business J Press in 1986 to Onward Kashiyama, who, as I mentioned, were our licensee, very successful licensees in Japan, I became I went from president to vice president at J Press. My wife and I moved to Florida. I got a master's degree in psychological counseling, which I think I had a great internship with all the customers at J Press who may have complained that the sleeves were too long. At any rate, after a couple of years in Florida, I'm an only child. My father was 90, is in his early 90s, and I felt I had to go back to the New Haven area to look after my father. And I moved back to Connecticut. And while I was there, I was contacted by Christian Shensfold, who was the owner of the blog Ivy Style, and he said, "Would you care to interview me?" I gave him an interview, which he then recorded, and that ended up as 5 inserts in his blog. He asked me to become a contributing editor of Ivy Style, and I wrote some 100 columns for them on Ivy Style. And J Press said, "Hey, how about coming over to J Press?" And I moved over to J Press as, quote, an archival consultant, where I began writing a bi-weekly column. I've so far done probably 100 of them. 2 books were published as compendiums of the column. I'm an MC at store events, and I'm thriving in my elder role at J Press. And to quote a song from the musical Gigi, "I'm glad I'm not young anymore."
I'd say you are thriving. How would you describe J Press now as it sits today?
Well, my grandfather had what he called the golden rules at J Press. Understand what our target customers want, number one. Make sure that the manufacturing facilities and trade meet the highest standards of workmanship and style. And 3, these clothes that are sold at J Press are not au courant. They're not for the street trade today. They are an investment which may last generationally. And I may add that my grandson, who just graduated Tulane University, for his graduation wardrobe, wore my 1950s. We thankfully were the same size. He wore my suit that I wore at my graduation at Dartmouth. What does that mean? It's year to year. Just clothes bought at J Press today not only represent excellent, superior taste and style and craft and workmanship, but they're meant as an investment to last long time.
How does J Press fit into the ever-increasing casualness of today's society?
Well, first of all, J Press has responded in a very poignant way. They opened up a new department called Pennant. And in fact, I just wrote a column, Winning the Pennant. Why winning the pennant? Because J Press Pennant has adapted the new casual wear for Gen Z. Now, does that mean they have lost the taste? The style remains the same, but sometimes the fits are a little tighter to fit the more lithe body physique of many Gen Xers. And they're also geared toward more casual wear. So there's a lot of anoraks and rugby shirts and sweatshirts, all with the J Press credentials of tailoring style and taste, but perhaps catering to a younger generation. Although I thrive there myself, and I have a lot of friends of mine, even not my elder age, but my middle age pals, love the pen and stuff at J Press, and they feel that they are younger when they get dressed up that way.